Well, it's interesting. You know, my first release, which shout out to the homie House Shoes and Street Corner Music Movement. My first release was something that kind of happened. I don't want to say on accident. I had been in conversation with House Shoes for years on putting something out. You know, he approached me, you know, a couple times about putting something out. Maybe initially just kind of like an EP or maybe just a single or something like that. And, you know, I would just send him music. He would hear something I would post and he'd be like, send me that. And so I kind of left it up to him to kind of cultivate the initial process. But the very first thing I put out was something that I put out on Bandcamp, which was on a project I say is instigated by DJ Inca One. Inca One is a mutual friend of myself and DJ House Shoes. And he's an LA staple. I think, you know, goes back and forth between the Bay Area and LA. And he has an event called Boombox in LA that I used to go to all the time. It's a monthly. And I want to say I first started doing like beat showcases at that spot. And so Shoes was one of the people who would frequently show up, as well as a bunch of other people, and just a lot of people in the LA beat scene in general. And it was a great outlet for me to kind of show new ideas. Mostly because it was funny. I didn't get let into a lot of beat battles. Beat battles wasn't something that people invited me to. Even the Red Bull beat battle thing, which was something I applied for on numerous occasions, I never got accepted to compete. So it was like, so for me, being able to kind of flex that muscle. So when you hear beats like an FTL or you know, a Gohan Attack or something like that, all those beats were made like, okay, whenever I do get to do a beat battle, these are going to be some of the tracks that I do, you know what I mean? But I was never invited to do one. So, you know, those tracks ended up just kind of falling by the wayside and being these great beat battle beats that never got used in a beat battle form, you know what I mean? But because of the events like Boombox, I was able to kind of flex that muscle and also meet these other people who were interested in putting, you know, giving these projects, you know, the light of day. And the first project in particular, yeah, I want to say a large majority of those tracks, the newest track on there, at the time of release, the newest track on there was maybe like a year and a half, like old. Everything, the oldest track on there might have been something that was maybe close to 6-7 years old. And, you know, and probably the follow-up Mood was, it wasn't that old. You know, I want to say there were things on there that are probably 3 or 4 years old. And some that are obviously much newer, you know, at least done within the fiscal year of that kind of coming out. But I think, you know, it's interesting. The Marvin's Mood track was something that kind of happened on a whim. Like I'd had like just this idea of using, because first of all, Marvin Gaye is one of my favorite vocalists of all time. Like, you know, growing up as a kid, I heard it in the house, and I was always fascinated by his stacked harmonies and what he would do with melody. I just loved everything he did. And so, you know, being able to utilize his voice in any kind of beat format was something I always wanted to do. And I kind of looked at it and I said, okay, he's got parts doing this record, and which I was lucky enough to figure out, like, okay, there's a version on one of the anniversary releases where it's just him and like congas, I think. It's like his vocals, like congas and like maybe strings come in a certain part or whatever. And that's kind of where it started. I would ultimately get more of the stems from that, but that's where it started for me, where it was this, my favorite part of that record is this breakdown section. And initially I was just going to use just that. And I was just going to use that section and say, okay, let me beat it and make a beat around this. But, you know, I put drums to it. And as I'm working with it, I had this other beat that I had been working on for a while. I was working on kind of this Dilla kind of like tribute, like EP or whatever, that really didn't end up really coming out because some of the things ended up getting released on their own. But he used this great guitar sample, I believe on an Elzai project. And I always thought it was a really dope like sample. And so I had this whole separate beat that was like, okay, I'm gonna use this guitar sample and put drums to this. And on the other side of it, I was using this Marvin section or whatever. And on accident one day, I used to use Contact like exclusively to sample before I started using Serato sample and drum rack and stuff like that. This is when I was still using Studio One. And I pulled up the wrong Contact session inside the sample, and it brought up the Marvin Gaye joint inside this Dilla beat. And his vocal just happened to fit so well. Like it initially, so that guitar loop started and just that I ya 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 like happened over, and I was like, ooh, okay, abort mission, abort mission, abort mission. Let's bring this together and see what I can do with it. And it just kind of unraveled in that way, in the best way possible, to where I was able to say, okay, how much of this worked with it and how much more can I work with it? And that's kind of how that kind of came into fruition, what it was. And also why it became this 2-part kind of beat, because, like I said, it was already kind of something on one side, but when I brought the vocals in from the other, or the guitar in, or however you want to look at it, it became kind of this like 2-piece monster,